The desert sun had a way of burning through every layer of a person's skin, bone, even spirit. Clara Bennett felt all three as she crossed the dusty trail leading back toward the settlement. Her canteen nearly empty and her basket filled with the herbs the local women needed for fevers and childbirth. The morning had started quiet, windless, too still for her liking. Even the birds sensed something wrong. That was when she heard it. A soft cry, fragile, uncertain, the sound of life clinging to its last breath. Clara froze. At first, she wondered if her mind was playing tricks on her. Out here, echoes traveled strangely, bouncing off canyon walls and pooling in low places. But then she heard it again, a baby's cry, thin and desperate. No child from town would be this far out. Not alone, Dot. She set down her basket and followed the sound. The brush was thick near the bend, a tangle of mesquite and dry grass. She pushed through carefully, whispering gentle words like she would to any frightened creature. When she parted the last branch, she gasped out there, wrapped in a torn hide blanket, lay a baby boy with long black hair stuck to his damp forehead. His tiny fists trembled as he cried, his face red from exhaustion. Someone had placed him on the ground, someone fleeing, someone injured, or someone who had no choice. And he wasn't a settler's child. He was Apache. Clara's heart pounded. Her town feared the Apache. Stories of raids, disappearances, and border clashes filled every tavern and church. But as she knelt beside the infant, none of that mattered. All she saw was a child fighting to stay alive. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, lifting him into her arms. He was burning with fever and starving. Whoever left him had done it in haste, but not cruelty. The blanket around him was clean, the knot tied carefully. Clara looked around the empty desert, waiting for someone to appear. A mother, a father, a warrior, anyone. But the land stayed silent. The baby dug his face into her chest, rooting instinctively. Clara swallowed hard. She had nursed frontier women's babies before neighbors, widows, travelers who passed through Santa Aria, but never a child of a tribe her town considered enemies. Yet he was shaking, and she knew exactly what that meant. If she didn't act now, he wouldn't make it another hour. Clara tucked him close, loosening the top of her dress just enough to nurse him. The infant latched immediately, hungry and desperate. His little fingers clutched the collar of her blouse as though clinging to life itself. While he fed, Clara felt something unexpected flood her chest, not fear. Not hesitation, but a fierce, protective tenderness. Something primal. Something ancient. He needs me. She stayed that way for several minutes, letting him drink until his breathing calmed. Only then did she stand, adjusting her clothing and cradling him gently. She gathered her basket with her free hand and began the long walk toward town. At the settlement gates, the reaction was immediate. "Clara, what in God's name? Is that an Indian baby? Put it down. His people will come for him." Voices rose around her. Men backed away. Mothers pulled their children behind their skirts. Even Pastor Whitmore looked shaken. Clara held the baby tighter. "He was alone," she said, "burning up with fever. I won't abandon him." "But he ain't yours," one of the ranch hands snapped. Clara lifted her chin. "Right now he is. At least until he's strong enough to survive." No one dared touch her. Something about the way she stood, dust on her boots, sun in her eyes. The infant nestled against her breast like he belonged there, made even the loudest men fall strangely silent. She pushed past the crowd and headed straight to her small cabin on the edge of town. Inside, she cooled the baby with wet cloths, fed him again, and wrapped him in a fresh quilt. He slept curled against her heartbeat, like he had finally found what he'd been searching for. But as dusk approached, a shadow of worry crept over her. If this child belonged to an Apache warrior, surely someone would come looking, and when they did, They would find their baby in her arms. Whether that made her a savior or a target, Clara didn't know, but she wouldn't give him up. Not yet, not until she knew he was safe. Night in Santa Aria always fell hard. Like a curtain dropping too fast on a stage, no one was ready to leave. Clara sat by her oil lamp, rocking the Apache baby slowly, humming the same tune she used to sing to her sister years ago. The little one had eaten, slept, eaten again, his strength returning by the hour. His fever had broken, and now he breathed in soft little sighs against her shoulder. For a brief moment, Clara allowed herself to believe the worst was behind them, but then the dogs began barking. One bark. Then three. Then a chorus of wild, panicked howls rolling across the settlement like a warning. Clara sat up straight. The baby stirred and whimpered, sensing the shift in her heartbeat. Clara soothed him quickly, though her own pulse hammered in her ears. Outside, boots thudded across the dirt. Men shouted. Doors slammed. Someone rang the bell at the church tower, a sound used only for fire. Attack or danger approaching. Clara rose and peeked out her window. The settlement was frantic. Lanterns swung wildly as men ran to fetch rifles. Women dragged their children into cellars. Somewhere near the corral, a horse screamed and kicked its stall, but the desert, the open black stretch beyond the gates, remained silent. Too silent. Clara's breath caught. They're coming for him. She didn't know who they were. Warriors, family. A tribe searching for what they lost, but she doubted they'd come gently. The baby whimpered again. It's all right, she whispered, kissing his hair. I won't let anyone harm you. But even as she said it, she wondered what power she truly had. A pounding knock shook her door so hard she flinched. Clara! Open up! It was Marshall Reed. She cracked the door. Marshall, please, he's sleeping. What's happening? His gaze darted to the infant in her arms, then back to the dark desert. Tracks were found. Good ones. Too good. Apache scout. He's closer than we thought. Clara swallowed. Her voice trembled. He's coming for the baby. Reed nodded grimly. And he won't be alone for long. Before she could reply, a sound split the night, an unearthly cry, sharp enough to freeze every breath in the settlement. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was a warrior's call, a warning that he had arrived. The marshal lifted his rifle. Get behind me, Clara, now. But he hadn't taken two. Steps before a tall shadow dropped from the roof of the trading post and landed. Silently in the dust, the settlement gasped as a single warrior stepped into the lantern. Light dot, bare-chested, bronze-skinned, muscles scarred from old battles. His hair, long as raven feathers, braided with pieces of turquoise. Around his neck hung a carved bone pendant. He stood calm, too calm, an arrow already knocked to the bow in his left hand. His eyes moved over every trembling settler, and then locked onto Clara. She sucked in a breath, because the moment he saw the baby in her arms, something inside him shattered and reformed in a single heartbeat. His bow lowered, his chest lifted with a long, ragged breath. His jaw trembled not with rage, but with staggering relief. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate. No one dared fire. No one even moved. The entire world seemed to shrink to the space between him and Clara when he finally stood in front of her, inches away. His voice broke into a whisper not meant for the others. You kept him alive. Clara clutched the child tighter. He was dying. Someone had to save him. The warrior's gaze softened with something she didn't expect, something like gratitude. Or awe. He reached out but stopped, his fingers flexing in hesitation before he touched the baby's cheek. The infant stirred and immediately reached for him. Clara felt a strange ache deep in her chest at the sight. The warrior's voice grew steadier, deeper. I am Coda. This child is my blood. My son. Clara nodded. I figured. Coda lifted his eyes to hers. And what she saw there was not anger. Not threat. It was reverence. As if she'd done something sacred. You fed him, he said. You gave him your warmth, your milk, your life. His hand hovered near her arm, never quite touching. That makes you more than a stranger. Her heart pounded. Coda's voice dropped to a murmur meant for her alone. You are the woman who brought my son back from death. Behind them, the townsfolk trembled. But between the three of them, Clara, the baby, and the warrior, the night stood absolutely still. Something had begun. Something none of them could turn back now. The night air remained heavy with tension, but for Clara, the world narrowed to the warrior standing before her. Coda. That was his name, sharp as flint, strong as the mountains. He watched the baby in her arms with a hungry tenderness she had never seen in any settler man. It was the look of someone who had crossed miles of danger for one single purpose, to find his child alive, and she had made that possible. Even so. Whispers rippled through the settlement behind them. He's here for the woman too. They'll drag her into their camp. She fed his kid means something to them. Clara tried not to listen, but their fear soaked into the air like spilled kerosene. Marshall Reed broke the silence first. Take your boy and leave. You step 1 foot closer to her, and Coda raised his head in a slow, controlled motion, eyes turning cold and deadly as winter stone. You will do nothing. The marshal stiffened. Every man with a firearm gripped it tighter. But Clara felt no fear. The warrior's sharpness wasn't aimed at her. It was aimed at anyone who might harm the baby she cradled. Coda's gaze softened again when he looked at them, her, and the child tucked against her breast. Give him to me, he said gently. Clara's heart flinched. She didn't want to. She'd held him through fever, fed him with her own body, soothed him when his tiny chest rattled with weak breathing. She had promised him safety, but he wasn't hers. She loosened the blanket, one hand trembling as she lifted the child toward his father. The moment Coda took the baby into his arms, his entire face changed. Harsh lines melted. His shoulders shook once, as if he'd been holding his breath for days. He pressed his forehead to the baby's and whispered words in Apache deep, soft, filled with grief and gratitude. Clara didn't understand the language, but she understood the emotion. He missed him. He mourned him. He thought he'd lost him forever. The baby nuzzled into Coda's chest like he had known that heartbeat from the very beginning. A bond restored. Clara should have felt only relief, but instead she felt hollow, empty where the baby's warmth had been. Her arms tingled with the sudden absence. Coda lifted his head again, and then, unexpectedly, heartbreakingly, he stepped forward and placed the baby back into Clara's arms. She gasped. Wait, no, you don't have to. I do, he said simply. What? Why? He straightened, standing tall, proud, and yet impossibly gentle. In my people's eyes, you are already bound to him. Clara blinked, confused. Bound how? The settlement behind her grew quiet, listening. Coda looked straight into her eyes, voice lowering to something sacred. A woman who nurses a warrior's child becomes part of him, part of his family. She is honored, respected. She is called Mother. The word trembled between them like a spark waiting to ignite. Clara's throat tightened. But I was only trying to save him, and you did. Coda's gaze softened, deepening with something she couldn't name. You gave him life when death surrounded him. No woman does that unless her spirit chooses it. Clara shook her head, overwhelmed. I didn't choose anything. I just found him. Coda stepped closer, not threatening, but certain, and lowered his voice so only she could hear. My son chose you. Her breath caught. The moment he latched to you, the moment he found comfort in your arms. He chose, and now his eyes flicked to the baby sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. He belongs to both of us until he no longer needs the milk that saved him. A murmur rose from behind them, the townsfolk horrified at his claim. Marshal Reed spoke again, voice tense. She ain't his mother. She ain't your woman. She's a settler. You have no right to. Coda's bow lifted a fraction, not aimed, not drawn, but enough to silence every single tongue. I have every right, Coda said softly. She carries the scent of my son on her skin, but my child sleeps with his ear over her heart. She fed him from her body. She is his mother until the Grand Spirits say otherwise. Clara's pulse thundered. She felt heat flood her cheeks, not from shame, but from the weight of his words. His tribe believed something she never expected, that nursing created a sacred bond, unbreakable for a time, a bond she had never asked for, and yet, deep inside, she couldn't deny how right it felt. Coda reached out, brushing his fingers along the baby's tiny foot exposed beneath the blanket. His voice dropped to a whisper that slid straight into Clara's heart. You are not alone in this anymore. No threat, no force. Just a promise. And it terrified her more than anything, because she believed him. The morning sun rose over the desert in streaks of gold and orange, and Clara found herself on a horse for the first time in her life, riding toward the Apache camp under Coda's watchful eyes. She felt the baby snug against her chest, his tiny fingers curling around her blouse, and the wind tangled her hair in ways she didn't mind. Every muscle in her body ached with unfamiliar motion, but her heart pounded with something stronger: anticipation, fear, and a strange, burgeoning excitement. Coda led the way, silent and sure. The settlement behind them disappeared into the shimmering heat, and with it, all the voices that had questioned her choices, all the men who would have doubted her courage. Out here, there was only the desert, the baby, and the warrior who had staked his trust in her. When the camp came into view, Clara froze. Tippis rose from the sand like living pyramids, smoke curling lazily from each fire. Children ran between them, barefoot and laughing, while women bent over pots and blankets, grinding corn and weaving baskets. Warriors sharpened knives and polished weapons, their eyes flicking toward the newcomer with curiosity and then respect as Coda approached, his baby still cradled in her arms. Clara's heart thudded. She didn't know the customs, the rituals, the ways of these people who had terrified the settlers for so long. She only knew one thing: she had a responsibility to the baby. And now, inexplicably, to the warrior who had claimed her role as the child's mother. Coda dismounted first, holding out his hand for her and the baby. His gaze softened in a way that made Clara feel both exposed and protected. Come, he said simply. You will stay here, with him. The women of the camp surrounded her cautiously at first. Their eyes were assessing, polite but unyielding. She met each gaze with a small nod, trying to communicate what she couldn't yet express in words. Coda whispered to her in low tones, You will learn, observe, listen. They will teach you the ways of the tribe, as they taught their mothers before you. And they did that by midday. Clara had learned how to grind corn into fine meal, how to stir a pot over a fire without spilling it, and how to soothe the babies who clung to the other women of the tribe. She marveled at the rhythm of their lives: work and rest, laughter and discipline, love and respect intertwined in every movement. Everywhere she went, someone offered guidance, a soft word of instruction, or a nod of encouragement. It was strange to be treated with respect instead of suspicion. Coda never left her side. He watched her closely, not with possessiveness, but with a quiet intensity that both unsettled and comforted her. Sometimes he would take the baby from her arms to show her how to wrap him in blankets, how to carry him when he grew too heavy for her. His hands were rough and scarred, yet gentle with the child. And every time he looked at her afterward, Clara felt her chest tighten. It wasn't just the practical lessons that struck her, it was the way the tribe accepted her. Even the children seemed to sense that she had saved their brother, their cousin, their future warrior. They followed her, tugging at her skirts, laughing when she mimicked their games, asking her to teach them songs from her world. And she found herself laughing back, her fear dissolving into something like belonging. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mesa, Coda led Clara to a small clearing. The baby slept in a cradleboard nearby, his chest rising and falling steadily. "You have done well today," Coda said, his voice low. "The tribe sees your courage. They see your heart. You are not a stranger here." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I never expected this," she admitted. "I only wanted to keep him alive." Coda stepped closer, resting a hand near hers. "And yet you did more than that. You became part of his life. Part of mine. Part of this tribe. That is no small thing." Her fingers brushed against his, accidental yet electric. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to see what could come of this life among the Apache, not just survival, but love, belonging, and a family she hadn't thought possible. That night, as she tucked the baby into his blanket and watched Coda settle beside the fire, Clara realized the truth. Her life had changed forever. She was no longer a frightened frontier girl. She was a mother. And in the eyes of the warrior whose son she had saved, she had already become something far more significant: family. The desert outside was quiet, but within the camp, the rhythm of life pulsed on. And Clara, for the first time in her life, felt she was exactly where she was meant to be. Night fell like velvet over the Apache camp, the firelight dancing across the tipis and casting long, flickering shadows on the sand. Clara sat near the fire, the baby cradled in her arms, humming softly to soothe him as he slept. The warmth of the flames touched her cheeks, but it could not calm the storm brewing in her chest. Coda was there too, not speaking, only watching her from across the fire. His eyes, dark and piercing, were fixed on her in a way that made her stomach tighten. There was a weight behind them, an unspoken question that had been growing since he had first seen her hold his son, since she had nursed the baby back to life. Finally, he moved. He came to sit beside her, careful not to disturb the child. The firelight flickered over his strong features, highlighting scars and lines of hardship, yet softened by an unguarded vulnerability she had never expected to see in the fearsome warrior. "Clara," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying a weight that demanded truth. "There is something you must know." She looked at him, heart fluttering. "What is it?" He drew a deep breath, as if summoning courage for a confession that had long been held in the shadows. "This child, he is my only son. My wife died giving birth. I thought I would never hold him, never see him alive again." His hand brushed lightly over the baby's small head. "When I found you, nursing him, I could not believe it. You gave him life, and yet I did not know your heart. You are strong, but I must ask, do you understand what this bond means?" Clara's pulse raced. She had felt the connection, the sacred tie the tribe spoke of, but hearing it from Coda made it feel alive, heavy, and real. I didn't know. I only wanted to keep him alive." Coda studied her face intently, his gaze searching for a flicker of deceit. There was none, only honesty, courage, and an instinctive love for the child. He exhaled slowly, relief passing through him like the wind across the desert. "You are the one my son chose," he said finally. "The moment he clung to you, it was as if he knew you would protect him, feed him, keep him from harm. And now, Clara, you are not just his protector. You are his mother in every way that matters. In the eyes of my people, and in my heart." Her hands trembled as she held the baby closer, feeling the warmth of his tiny body and the weight of Koda's words. She had not expected this. No one in her life had ever called her a mother. Not her neighbors, not her distant relatives, not even herself. Yet here she was, entrusted with a life that depended on her, chosen by a warrior who had every right to claim her allegiance. Koda leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for her. I did not know if you would stay, if you would let him go, or if you would fight to protect him. And now I see, you have more courage than I imagined, more heart than any woman I have ever known. Clara's breath caught. She had not expected such words. His admiration, his raw honesty, pressed against her chest, and she felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through her. The desert night seemed smaller, softer, cocooned around them like a protective shell. I don't know what to say, she admitted, voice trembling. I only know I will care for him, as long as he needs me. I will do whatever it takes. Koda's hand brushed hers, deliberate and tender. That is enough, he said. You need say nothing else. You have already proven it with every act of love you have given him. The spirits see it, and so do I. A silence settled between them, filled only with the baby's quiet breathing and the crackle of the fire. Clara felt her heart swell, not just with pride or relief, but with something deeper, a sense of belonging she had never known, a family she had never imagined. For the first time, she allowed herself to look at Koda not as a fearsome warrior, not as the father of the child she had saved, but as something entirely new, a man who trusted her, who recognized her courage, and who, perhaps, was beginning to care for her as much as she did for his son. And as the night deepened, the stars stretching endlessly overhead, Clara realized the truth. Her life had changed irrevocably. She was no longer just a stranger in the desert. She was part of a family. And in Koda's eyes, she had already found a place she could call home. The desert night wrapped around them, quiet but alive, and in its stillness, Clara understood this was only the beginning. The morning sun spilled across the desert, but Clara could not enjoy its warmth. Her hands were busy preparing the baby's food, her mind restless, and every shadow beyond the camp felt like a threat. Word of her presence among the Apache had already begun to spread, carried by travelers, traders, and whispers from neighboring settlements. By midday, the rumors had reached ears she wished had never heard them. The Apache have taken a white woman, the townsfolk whispered in fear. They mean to keep her. Who knows what they'll do with her? Marshal Reed must intervene. She's a settler. Clara felt a knot tighten in her chest. She had feared the arrival of Koda's warriors when she first found the baby. But now she feared the people who had raised her, the ones who believed her loyalty belonged to them, not to the life she had chosen to protect. It wasn't long before the threat became real. By mid-afternoon, a small group of armed men approached the edge of the camp. Mounted on rough horses, rifles strapped to their backs, their expressions were stern, eyes cold with suspicion and anger. Koda noticed them first. His posture stiffened, muscles coiling like a panther ready to strike. He placed a steadying hand on Clara's shoulder. "Stay behind me," he murmured. The baby nestled in her arms stirred, sensing the tension in the air. The leader of the group, a burly man named Jackson, dismounted and called out across the clearing. "Koda, we've come for the woman. She belongs to the settlement, not to you. Hand her over." Clara's stomach twisted. Her life had never felt so fragile, yet at the same time she realized something she hadn't before. She was not alone. Not really. Koda's voice was calm, but each word carried the weight of steel. "She belongs to no one but my son and me. You will not touch her." Jackson sneered. "You think a few arrows and your savage warriors can keep her? She is a white woman, Koda. You have no claim over her." Clara's heart pounded, but she did not flinch. She lifted the baby slightly, letting him peek over her shoulder. His small eyes, dark and trusting, seemed to plead with her, and suddenly Clara knew what she had to do. She could no longer be merely a protector. She had to stand openly and defiantly with the warrior who had entrusted his child to her. "I am his mother," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "And I will not go with you. You cannot take him or me away from the only home I have now." The men exchanged uneasy glances. No one had expected the woman to speak, let alone claim such authority. Coda stepped forward, his hands resting lightly on the baby's blanket. "You will leave now," he said, eyes hard as flint, "or you will find yourselves tested." Jackson laughed, though it was shaky. "Tested? Against what?" "You're just a warrior with a small band." "We have rifles, Coda." Coda's hand moved in a slow, deliberate gesture. Arrows appeared in the hands of the warriors hidden around the camp. They were everywhere, silent and patient, waiting only for a signal. Jackson's bravado faltered as he realized the odds had shifted entirely. Clara's hands clenched the baby against her chest. "Go home," she said firmly, surprising herself with the authority in her voice. "We are not afraid." The leader of the group hesitated, then finally nodded. His men backed away, muttering threats, but none dared approach closer. The desert swallowed them as they retreated toward the settlement. Clara sank to her knees by the fire, relief washing over her in waves. The baby stirred and nestled against her again, cooing softly as if he understood the danger that had just passed. Coda knelt beside her, brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead. "You were brave," he said softly, his hand lingering near hers. "You stood when others would have run. That courage, it is yours, and it will bind you to this tribe, to me, forever." Clara looked at him, her chest still tight with adrenaline, and realized she had never felt more certain of her choice. The settlers might never understand her bond with the Apache child or with Coda, but she didn't need them to. She had made her place, and she would fight to protect it. That night, as the desert cooled and the stars glittered overhead, Clara felt something shift deep inside her. She was no longer a frightened girl alone in the frontier. She was a mother, a protector, a woman who had chosen her family and would defend them, no matter the cost. The desert was wide and dangerous, but for the first time, she felt its vastness like a promise. Here she was safe. Here she belonged. The desert dawn was pale and quiet, a fragile light brushing over the camp. Clara sat by the fire, the baby sleeping soundly in her lap, and listened to the soft movements of the Apache warriors preparing for the day. Normally, mornings were simple: chores, lessons, meals. But after the settlers' attack the day before, the air still held tension, an invisible weight pressing down on every living thing in the camp. Clara's own pulse refused to calm. The memory of armed men pointing rifles at her, threatening the baby she had nursed and loved, burned fresh in her mind. But beneath that fear lay a new, unexpected emotion, a strange, tender awareness that she could no longer imagine a life without Coda. He was beside her, silently observing the camp as he often did. His sharp eyes missed nothing, the children laughing, the warriors readying for patrol, the elders quietly passing judgment on their visitors, but when they met hers, she saw something else entirely. Something soft, hidden beneath his usual stoic strength. Coda knelt beside her, brushing a hand lightly over the baby's blanket. "You did well yesterday," he said, his voice low, steady, and intimate. "You could have run like most would, but you stayed. You protected him and me." Clara's heart stuttered at his words. I couldn't let them take him," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's all I have right now. Besides you." Koda's eyes darkened, the shadow of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "And yet you risked yourself," he said, leaning closer, so close that she could feel the warmth of his breath. "You stood against men who would have killed you both, and never flinched. That courage, it belongs not only to your body, but to your heart." Clara's cheeks warmed. She had known admiration before, respect, even friendship, but never this intensity. Never this closeness. Her pulse leapt, and she realized she was trembling. The baby stirred, sensing the quiet tension, and reached out to clutch Koda's finger. The small gesture broke the moment's delicate tension, and for an instant, Clara allowed herself to laugh a soft, nervous sound. Koda's lips curved in the barest hint of a smile, and his eyes softened again, filled with a longing she had never dared to imagine. "You have changed everything," Clara whispered, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "I came here to save a child. And somehow I found something I never expected." "And what is that?" Koda asked, his voice low, compelling. "Something like love," she admitted, barely daring to say it. Her eyes searched his, and for the first time, she allowed herself to hope that he felt the same. He moved closer until their knees nearly touched. The firelight flickered across his strong, scarred features, softening the hard lines with gold and orange hues. "Then you have found truth," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Because love demands courage, Clara. Courage to stand, courage to protect, courage to claim what is yours, and to fight for it." Her breath caught. The desert seemed to hold its breath with her. She realized he was not speaking only of the baby or of her place in the tribe, but of them, of the unspoken bond that had grown between them, subtle yet undeniable. In the hours and days she had spent tending his son, sharing the camp, learning the ways of his people, Clara swallowed, feeling her own courage swell. She would fight for this life, for this family, for this man who had trusted her with the most precious gift in his world. She could no longer deny the truth rising in her chest. She loved him, too. Koda's hand reached for hers, fingers brushing against hers with a gentle insistence. "You do not need words to tell me," he said. "Your heart has already spoken through your actions, through the life you have given my son, and through the courage you carry. That is enough for me." Clara's heart leapt. She placed her hand over his, feeling the rough, strong skin of his palm against hers. In that single touch, in the warmth of his presence, she knew that nothing, not fear, not doubt, not the world beyond the camp could separate them. As the baby slept peacefully between them, Clara allowed herself to lean closer, her cheek brushing Koda's shoulder. The desert stretched endlessly around them, vast and wild, but for the first time, she felt the kind of safety that could only come from love that demanded courage. Yes, but offered protection, belonging, and hope in return. And in the quiet morning, surrounded by firelight, the baby's soft breathing, and the whisper of wind over the desert, Clara understood that some choices were made not by reason, but by heart. And hers had chosen Koda. The desert morning glowed in soft shades of gold and rose, painting the camp in a warmth that felt almost sacred. Clara sat outside her tipi, the baby asleep in her lap, wrapped snugly in a blanket. Koda stood nearby, his eyes scanning the horizon as always, yet his attention never left her or his son. In the quiet moments before the day fully began, the world felt still, as if holding its breath in recognition of the life that had been rebuilt here, a life born of courage, love, and choice. The events of the past days had bound them together in ways neither Clara nor Koda could have imagined. From the instant she had found the baby in the desert, to nursing him back to health, to standing fearless against the settlers' threats, Clara had proven her worth to the tribe, to Koda, and most importantly, to herself. She was no longer merely a visitor. She was family. Coda approached her, his strides measured, deliberate, carrying the quiet power of a man who commanded respect, yet offered care in equal measure. He knelt beside her, resting one hand lightly on the baby's blanket and the other brushing her cheek with an uncharacteristic gentleness. The gesture made Clara's breath catch. His hands were strong, battle-worn, yet the tenderness he showed her made her heart swell. "You have done more than keep him alive," he said, his voice low and steady. "You have given him a mother, a protector, and a woman whose courage I can trust with my life. You have given me hope I thought I would never feel again." Clara looked at him, her chest tight with emotion. She had cared for the baby, yes, but she had never expected that doing so would forge a connection between her and the warrior whose son she had saved. Now, seeing the depth of his gaze, she understood the truth. She had become essential to him in a way words could scarcely capture. Coda lifted the baby carefully, letting Clara hold him again for a brief moment, and then placed the child back between them. His dark eyes met hers, and she saw something she had not yet fully acknowledged: desire, respect, and a quiet promise. "You are his mother," he said simply, "and if you wish it, you are my woman." The words struck her, filling her with a mixture of shock, joy, and relief. She had feared this life would demand sacrifices she could not make, that the baby's father might never accept her beyond her role as caretaker. Yet here he was, offering her not just acceptance, but a place at his side, a family she could call her own. Clara's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying the scent of sage and sand, as if the land itself were blessing this union. I accept," she said, her voice trembling, yet steady with certainty. "I want this life, with you and with him." Coda's lips curved into the faintest, most genuine smile she had ever seen. He brushed a kiss to her forehead, and in that simple act, Clara felt the culmination of every risk, every moment of fear, every tender hour spent caring for the baby. She was no longer alone. She had found a family, one chosen by destiny itself. The tribe, witnessing the quiet exchange, murmured in approval. Children gathered nearby, peering curiously, and women nodded knowingly, recognizing the sacred bond that had formed between them. The elders, ever watchful, gave their silent blessing. Here, in this desert camp, a new family had been forged out as the sun rose higher. Bathing the camp in its golden light, Clara held the baby close, feeling his heartbeat against hers. Coda knelt beside her, resting his hand on the small of her back. Together, they watched the settlement of Tippis come to life. The rhythm of daily chores punctuated by laughter, chatter, and the small, quiet victories of survival. In that moment, Clara realized that life had brought her here for a reason. She had started as a stranger in the desert, a girl with nothing but courage and a will to save a child. Now she was a mother, a woman loved by a warrior, and part of a family bound not by blood alone, but by trust, bravery, and the choices they had made for each other. The desert stretched endlessly around them, wide and wild, yet no longer lonely. Clara knew she would face challenges, dangers, and hardships. Life in the frontier was never simple, but she also knew that together they could endure anything. She had found love, loyalty, and a home she had never dared to dream of. Coda leaned closer, whispering softly in her ear, "Together we are stronger than any threat. Together we are a family." Clara rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the truth of his words settle deep within her heart. She smiled, rocking the baby gently, and finally allowed herself to believe in the impossible, that she had found a family chosen by destiny, and that the desert, once harsh and unforgiving, had become a place of hope, love, and belonging. And in that moment, With the sun shining over the vast wilderness, Clara knew she was home.